Finally, we have come to a point where we can talk about anonymous functions. Now, as the term anonymous clearly says that a function that doesn't have a name. Now, if you look at our examples that we have been using, we always give function a name like head or tail or something like that, or random, or we had random f, we had square, right? We had double times 5. Suppose we were able to declare a function without a name. How do we do that? And that is what we are going to discuss in this video. Now, uh, look at this. We have a variable. We are using a variable here to store a number. What would math.random return? A value between 0 and 1? We are using it here. Now, can we avoid writing using this variable, and instead wherever this variable is used, we can take this and paste it here, right? Which we have done in the next example. We have avoided using variable and we are just putting it here, right? No variable, just the math.random is called directly. Now I want to make a point here. Just as you can use numbers without assigning them to variables. Look at this. There was a function which would return a number and I was using a variable. I can do the same thing without using a variable. So just as I can use numbers without assigning them to variables, you can use the number directly. It's a very basic thing, right? You can use a number directly. You don't have to store it in a variable. But in the same way, you can do the same with functions, right? So we can actually declare functions without giving it a name like square or a double or head or tail or times 5. All these things are not needed. Look at this function. I'm declaring a function and I'm not giving it a name. Ideally, what would happen is you will have some f function name would be here, right? But I'm not giving it a name like square or double. What I'm instead doing right now, and that too temporarily, is I'm putting it to assigning this to a variable so that I can refer to it. So let's take I'll take this definition and I'll go to my console and I will run it. So I have defined a function myf. So let's check what is there in myf. I just type myf without invoking it and I see that it's a function, right? It takes x as a parameter and returns x times x. So if I just give myf and I run this, it says it's not a number because x is not defined and it tried to multiply with that. So what I should be doing is I should give some number inside and invoke it. That's fine. Now I'm able to invoke a function which didn't have a name. However, I did one thing. I still used a reference as a variable. What if I do not want to use this reference variable and declare a function, right? So to do that, what I would have to do is I have to do something like this. So I add an extra parenthesis around it. So I go ahead and I will paste it here. And that's a function, right? You see that I don't have any issues with it. Just as I typed myf and it returned the definition of myf. If I put these parentheses around the function definition, it is equivalent to using a variable name for the function. Now to invoke this, how do I invoke? Just as I have this function and pass the parentheses and inside that a value, I can use it now. I can use this function, have the parenthesis and pass some value in it, right? Or say it is 7 times 7 times 7, or let's make it 5, it's easier, right? It's 125. So this is how you can have an anonymous function. It's a function without any name, neither does it refer to any variable. So you have a function which doesn't have a name. It doesn't have any variable as well. You may be thinking, what's the use of a function that doesn't have a name or a reference? Because if it doesn't have a name or a reference, you'll not be able to use it, right? And the whole idea of why we have a function is so that it can be called and again. But if you don't have a name or a reference, how are you going to call it? Well, there are advantages of having a function without a name or a reference. And that is what we are going to see now. Let's go ahead and what we do now is, I want to give you an assignment. I want you to take this randomf functions that we have done before, like this randomf, right? I want you to write this same function without assuming that double and square are declared. So you have to assume that double and square are not declared. Let's go and see this function, right? Here you have square and double are declared. So I'll just copy this part of it and I'll go here in my console and I will type it here. Now this one works fine because my square and double were already declared, right? So let me check that square, right? It is already, oh, it's not defined. I think I lost that session. So I will just go ahead and say square 9. It's lost. So what I should do is I should declare a function and I'll call it square, right? Yeah, and then square is not defined. Okay, this time it's fine, right? I declared square, so in a similar way I will declare double. So if I have square and double defined, then if I invoke this function, which one? If I invoke randomF, right? So I'll go ahead and I'll check if square is defined. Yes. Is double defined? Yes, it is, but I'll double check it. It is defined. Yes. Now I will call randomF, right? RandomF is defined. Let me invoke randomF. It is returning either one of them, right? So it assumes that double and square is defined. Suppose I redefine my function now. I would now change randomF to something, to a function that is not existing. So I'll rename these functions and I know these are not existing. So when I invoke this, I get an error. What does it say? It says that square one is not defined. So when you want to use a function, you have to, and you're returning a function from there, we are returning square and double. We have to make sure that square and double are actually existing. Now to solve such situation where you don't know whether a function is existing or not, you can actually use this format. Now you can have this randomF, right? And instead of having the square function being referenced here, you can define that function directly. So I'll take this up and clear my console and I'll paste it here. Now I have a function randomF. Let me call it randomF2, right? And here I'm returning a function this way. Okay, so I'll call it randomF2 and I'll invoke that. What does it return? It returns the square part, right? So it expects a parameter. So can I pass something like 5 here? Yeah, you can. So when it is invoked, I got 25, it's the square, now it's double, it's double. So what you can see is that you can use anonymous functions if you do not want to depend upon, or you don't have any ways to make sure that a function that you want to call and return is already defined or not, right? So that's what we want to show about random functions, sorry, anonymous functions. And with this, we are ready for AngularJS.